Talmoana Exiles, and welcome to my very first build guide for Path of Exile 2. Now this is a beginner's guide. It's a simple explanation of the class and character I have been playing since the launch of Path of Exile 2, the Monk, specifically a Lightning Monk. This build guide is structured in a very simple and succinct manner. We are not getting into the weeds of all the DPS calculations and all the ratings of evasion and armor and the like. We are talking about the functions of the build, how you can construct it, and how you can progress through content up to tier 10 maps, which is the extent of what I have currently cleared in the endgame. This build excels during the campaign, especially in Cruel, where I was deleting bosses in 5 to 10 seconds. I've also been deleting pretty much everything leading up into tier 10 maps or waystones in the Atlas, with very little struggles once I addressed my defenses. We're going to go over all of that in this build guide, so make sure if you are looking for something that is super analytical and in depth, this is not going to be the video for you. And I want to make that apparent. I'm also not promising that this build is going to blast all endgame content, that it is going to be a top tier performer in terms of the ladders and leaderboards and survivability. But it is going to progress you decently far into the endgame, and it is a whole heck of a lot of fun. On screen right now is the breakdown of how this build guide is structured, and there are timestamps in the description below. Additionally, if you would like a written version of this build guide, there is a link to my Mobalytics build guide page in the description as well. If you have any questions about the build at the end of this video, please go ahead and leave a comment below, or just join me on one of my live streams. I'm live streaming pretty consistently on Tuesdays and Thursdays, in addition to all of my regular podcasts. Finally, before we dive deeply within, if you do like this style of content from myself, which is very different from my usual content, please go ahead and give the video a like and subscribe to the channel for more future content like this. Both are entirely free, and they also signal to me that this type of content is wanted on my channel. Okay, so obviously we are a monk, a lightning monk. We'll get into the Ascendancy in a moment. We are an invoker, but we're going to start with the most important part of the build, and that is the skill gems we are using alongside the support gems, which are a little bit more malleable as I am continuing to experiment with them as the build gets deeper into endgame. Of utmost importance right now is Tempest Flurry. This is our main skill. We're using it as essentially an auto attack to kill tons of monsters and combo it together with Charged Staff. Charged Staff is that ability that shoots out all the lightning non-projectiles that hit enemies from afar. It deals a tremendous amount of damage and is why we need to generate power charges, which we'll get into later in the video. Currently with Tempest Flurry, which looks like this, it's a repeating strike right here. We have these support gems attached to it. Martial Tempo, which gives us more attack speed. This also combos very well together with the Tempest Bell, which is something that we drop down on every single boss or tanky rare that we find. We also have Lightning Infusion, which is just raw extra lightning damage, which is what we are spec'd into with Tempest Flurry because it converts our physical damage into lightning damage. And then we have Close Combat Support, which deals more damage the closer we are to enemies, and we are pretty close to enemies when we're using Tempest Flurry. And finally, I don't have a 5 link yet. I need a perfect Jeweler's Orb. I have Crescendo, which causes that final strike, the most powerful strike of the auto attack, essentially, to repeat twice. You can see 2 lightning bolts strike down from above. That is because we have Crescendo. I have experimented with a few other support gems here, including Rage Support, and I've found that this combination right now is the best. I also don't really run out of mana when I'm using this alongside Charged Staff, and if I ever do, I can just use my mana flask right here. But as of right now, in up to tier 10 maps, mana has not been a problem. Let's fly on over to Charged Staff and then Tempest Bell, which are the 2 other active abilities we are using and are very important to the build. The Charged Staff consumes power charges to empower our strikes to get these lightning non-projectiles, even though they look like projectiles, to fly out of our staff. They hit stuff from afar and they deal big damage, and it feels so good. It essentially turns parts of this build into non-melee because these charged staff things deal so much damage. It feels a lot like Frost Blades in Path of Exile 1 if you've played that game. Currently on Charged Staff, I have 3 support gems. The first is Primal Armament, which is merely making these deal more weapon elemental damage. It's a big boost. Then I have Persistence, which causes this buff. It is a buff to last for 40% longer. When I consume power charges, I get this buff on my weapon for quite a long time. I've never had a problem with keeping it up on my weapon during pack fights or boss fights in either power generation method, whether it is passive, which is what I'm currently using and what I will go over momentarily, or active, which is using skills like Killing Palm or Siphoning Strike to keep up those power charges. I finally then have Elemental Focus, which just makes this do more elemental damage, but it does not inflict elemental ailments, which is fine because I am inflicting all of my elemental ailments with either Tempest Flurry or Herald of Thunder. Get to Herald of Thunder in just a moment. We then have Tempest Bell, which right now is just our big ability that deals tremendous damage to bosses and tanky rares. On it, I have Magnified Effect. It just makes a larger area of effect on the bell. Font of Rage, which helps generate rage on the bell, and Overabundance, which gives +1 to limit of the bell while lowering the skill effect duration. This doesn't affect the bell though, because the bell disappears after a certain number of strikes. So essentially, I can get up 2 bells during a boss fight or a tanky rare fight, and they will deal giga damage to either. My final 2 active abilities before we get to the buffs are Killing Palm, which I am merely using for mobility right now. It shoots me across the map as long as I have an enemy targeted. And then Sniper's Mark, which helps me generate power charges on prolonged boss fights due to the way I'm currently generating power charges using a certain keystone on the tree. I do not really use my auto attacks anymore. Those have been retired, but they are huge helps, especially throughout the campaign itself. So I do recommend you put in support gems to these auto attacks from your quarterstaff, especially early on in Acts 1 and 2. Now let's get to our buff gems that we are using right now, and we are using 4 because I have a tremendous amount of spirit from my certain passives from my Invoker Ascendancy that we'll get to momentarily. The first 2 are Ghost Dance and Wind Dancer. Both of these are defensive buffs that help with survivability massively. I would recommend you focus on getting these 2 first before using more defensive buffs like Herald of Thunder, but you will need Combat Frenzy to focus on as well, because this is how, if you're not doing it actively, you are generating power charges. Once again, we're going to get to that in this video. There is a timestamp below if that's just what you're looking for. Wind Dancer gives you more evasion, and we are an evasion-centered build for defenses. We're not building armor. We're not truly building oodles of energy shield. We're not blocking. We are evading attacks. It helps massively because you can also evade spell projectiles, and hits. The one big thing we have to look out for is slams. And for slams, we are moving out of the way, or we are dodge rolling, okay? Those are the scary things for this build. And then we have Ghost Dance, which grants us more energy shield when we get hit. And while I said we don't have a ton of energy shield, we still do have a little bit, and every little bit matters, especially when a bunch of attacks are coming your way in the endgame. We'll talk more about Combat Frenzy in the power charge generation section, but what we'll talk about right now is Herald of Thunder, which is a pure offensive buff. It helps us kill monsters around us when we're hitting, and it helps electrocute monsters due to the support gem setup that I have right here. Electrocute and Shock Siphon. Electrocute is big, and I did not realize how powerful this was on Herald of Thunder and how well it combines with the way we generate power charges using Combat Frenzy. Electrocute, for those of you who don't know, is basically a freeze, but for lightning damage, and it is big. Shock Siphon merely helps us absorb more energy shield when we kill something that is shocked. And then I also want to showcase, I nearly forgot, on Wind Dancer, we have these 2 particular support gems. Blind, so when this pops, we blind enemies around us. And then we have Cannibalism, which is big. 4% of life recovered on kill while a socketed skill is active. That is excellent. That helps us pop and grow our life back, especially in endgame when lots of monsters are surrounding you and dying. It's big. I would slot this in first if possible. Then with Ghost Dance, we have Fast Forward, which means supported skills have a 30% less skill effect duration. So we're constantly refreshing those ghost shrouds, and they are on us more often because this duration is lessened. That was the rudimentary rundown of the skill and support gems I'm currently using. There is room for a lot of experimentation here with other gems. You can even try stuff that I have attempted and failed at, such as Gathering Storm for more shocked ground. You can use stuff like Stormwave and even Falling Thunder in great ways. I think there are some builds out there utilizing all of these gems. While I am not, I'm doing the very basic Tempest Flurry Charge Staff version. And remember, this is purely lightning focused. We are not freezing on this build, although I think, as we'll talk about at the end of the video, you can pivot into an Ice Strike build with this sort of monk. Okay, now we are going to take a look at P, the passive skill tree. Right now, I have ascended twice, so I have 2 different sets of ascendancy points. The first one that I went with is Shock Effect, and I am the Thunder, which essentially gets us extra lightning damage and 25% chance on shocking enemies to create shocked ground, which keeps anything on them shocked, which is great. And then I was with And I Shall Rage, which grants Unbound Avatar, but I wasn't clicking it. I was being silly. I wasn't clicking it and I wasn't getting it up as often as I would have liked, and I was struggling a bit of defense on maps. So I swapped from And I Shall Rage to Evasion and Energy Shield and Lead Me Through Grace, which gets me more spirit on my body armor, which allowed me to buff up those defensive auras. And then I'm going to go to this and protect me from harm once I get that third ascension set of points. Physical damage reduction from armor is based on your combined armor and evasion rating. So we are literally just going to do evasion rating stacking, and it's 40% less evasion rating. This is going to give us massive physical damage reduction. And as long as we keep our resistances up, of which they are currently not up, and we're still doing great, we are going to take not a lot of damage. And then I think for my last set of nodes, I'm going to ignore this wheel right here, and I'm going to go to crit chance and then sunder my enemies. Critical hits ignore non-negative enemy monster elemental resistances, because as you can see in the rest of my skill tree, I am a crit-based lightning build. So let's look at the passive skill tree. Big disclaimer here. I am not a build crafter. I am a dude who was looking at the passive skill tree as I loaded into the game, looking at the gems and saying, ooh, this makes sense. This looks like it'll fit together. I do have some sort of knowledge from Path of Exile 1 and playing that for thousands of hours, but I didn't do any calculations. I didn't do any pre-planning, and this is the tree I have landed on right now. I essentially said, okay, let's go for all the power charge nodes. Let's go for all the crits nodes. Let's go for all the lightning nodes. Oh, I'm having some struggles with evasion. Let's get some of the evasion nodes here and here. Oh, we're using quarterstaffs. These quarterstaff nodes look great. Let's use these quarterstaff nodes right here. And that is how I have pathed through the tree. The tree is in the Mobalytics link below. It's also on screen right now, as you can see. For my final few levels, as of now, I'm currently going to be pathing into more evasion-based stuff and then nabbing up all the other crit and power charge nodes as they come along. Maybe getting these quarterstaff nodes right here as well. We're going to see how that functions. Right now, it's been working great. I have one keystone on my entire tree, and that is Resonance, which we're going to get into in just a moment after we look at our items. And this is how I'm generating power charges with absolute ease, basically passively. This passive skill tree, like I said, it's not too complicated. I think many people can figure out how to build something like a lightning monk if they just look for the thematic elements of said monk and mash them together. It's been working out so far, and it's, like I said, smooth sailing and quite enjoyable. You can also see that I am not allocating any points for weapon set 1 or 2, and that is because I have small brain and I have not experimented with this at all. There might be a world where you can do a lightning monk and a cold monk and use that, but I have not done it so far. My brain hasn't expanded to that magnitude just yet. Perhaps in the future on my second, third, or fourth character, of which I will have because I really, really love this game. All right, we are now in the corner of the hideout, and it is time to look at our items. Once again, I am just building these as I go along. I have not used trade at all, so I really think that this section is going to just be giving general advice on the type of items you should be getting as you move through the campaign and into early endgame. I'm going to focus on the staff, because the staff is the most important part of your character. Right here we have an advanced barrier quarterstaff right now, and there are 3, I'd say, important mods on it. One is the 102% increased phys damage, 2 is the adds 3 to 103 lightning damage, and 3 is the 106% increased elemental damage with attacks. Those are the 3 big mods you are going to be looking for on this type of quarterstaff, alongside an adds X to X physical damage mod. Because remember, you are converting 60% of your physical damage into lightning damage with Tempest Flurry right now. So you want to get big physical damage on your quarterstaff, and you want to get big extra added lightning damage to your quarterstaff as well. So those top 3 stats right there are the ones you will be looking for. You also want on your quarterstaff, if possible, critical damage bonus, which you can see I do have, attack speed bonus, and then that 6th and final mod can be variable. You can get something like increased stun duration, because that's great on bosses or tanky rares and the like that you are stunning, but there are probably some other mods on there that you would be fine with as well that are escaping my mind at the moment. Oh, my camera has moved so you can see the rest of my current items. So on everything else, everyone, you want to look for resistances, except on your boots, which you also want to have movement speed on them. Resistances are king right now, and I'm currently working on capping all of them. As you are getting through the end game, you want all these to be at 75% or higher. And when you are in endgame especially, you want to focus on chaos resistance. That's one that's really hard to build up. You're probably going to want amethyst rings, of which I found a few, but then I've slammed them and gotten mods that do not work for my particular character. For everything else except your helmet, you're going to want to stack evasion rating. You can see my body armor has big evasion rating, and I'm going to try to get as much evasion on my armor as possible. Same with my gloves, and same with my boots, which are both pretty crap right now, but I have not used trade. I'm just getting stuff from vendors, crafting stuff, getting stuff off the ground. You then want a big energy shield helmet because of this particular node right over here, which I've grabbed. Subterfuge Mask, +2 evasion rating per 1 max energy shield on equipped helmet. So you can actually end up getting a big chunk of energy shield from your helm, in addition to, what is this? It's 162 evasion rating right now, which is pretty darn awesome. I'm going to keep trying to get that energy shield on my helm so that I can bulk up my evasion rating. Then for flasks, I don't have much advice on flasks as of right now. I do like the instant recovery on your health flask because it really helps in those oh crap situations in which you are pressing your 1 button very, very quickly. And then on my mana flask, I have the 0.25 charges gained per second, but that really has not been an issue because in endgame, there are so many monsters, especially magic and rare monsters, and you are killing them very quickly. So I've not ran out of flask charges since the Act 3 final boss on normal difficulty. For charms, I've additionally been swapping between all of them based on what I am currently encountering in the game right now. Freeze was the most annoying, so I have a thawing charm, which gets rid of freeze when I am frozen. Once I get more charm slots, which you actually need to get modifiers on your belt to obtain, I'm not sure what I'll do. It'll probably have to do with stunning and maybe shock, just so I can avoid those one-shots that might still be happening after the latest balance patch. I haven't found any uniques that slot into my build, and I've not looked up any uniques that could slot into my build well, so there might be some that work. I know there's something to do with electrocution on gloves, but I haven't, once again, looked up any gloves, so you can get away with doing a complete rare item build on the Lightning Monk all the way from the beach in Act 1, or should I say the riverbank in Act 1, all the way up until where I currently am in the end game itself right here. And I'm getting far. I'm getting way farther than I thought I was going to get on my own build, and that is awesome. Okay, we're finally there. Power charge generation on your monk. Let's see what we do. Currently, I am doing it passively, and I'm doing so through this keystone right here, Resonance, which causes me to gain power charges instead of frenzy charges. Now, how am I getting frenzy charges? Well, pulling up the gem screen right here, I have Combat Frenzy, which says gain a frenzy charge when you freeze, electrocute, or pin an enemy no more than once every 6 seconds. Well, using Herald of Thunder and the Electrocute support gem, I am currently electrocuting enemies passively all the time and getting more than enough power charges to sustain charged staff. And I know some people say that it's not technically passive. it feels basically passive because I am just hitting enemies and I'm generating power charges, reactivating charge stat, and it's up the entire map. Additionally, if you find yourself on a boss and you don't have power charges from killing monsters and electrocuting monsters, which are easier to electrocute than a boss, I also have Sniper's Mark, which allows you to mark something like a boss, and it says, marks a target. The next critical hit the target receives consumes the mark to deal extra damage and grants you a frenzy charge. And since our frenzy charges turn into power charges, we'll actually be gaining power charges on bosses when we crit, and we are a crit-based build, so we are critting quite often. There are also two ways to manually generate power charges if you don't want to spend your point on those keystones or you don't have room in your build for combat frenzy. And the first one is killing Palm. It allows you to cull an enemy and get yourself a power charge. They will be in cull range when a little blue dot is flying above their head. Just use this on them and you'll get yourself a power charge. I still have it on my build because I like the mobility and I like being able to cull bosses if needed, but it's not granting me a power charge, it's granting me an endurance charge because I have resonance and I can do nothing with the endurance charges right now. The other way to get power charges if you're not using the resonance method is via a skill gem called Siphoning Strike. This allows you to absorb shocks from enemies to grant yourself a power charge. This is what I used to use on bosses before using the Resonance Combat Frenzy tech, and it worked very well. You can even use this on rare monsters, magic monsters, or regular monsters. It's just sometimes you kill those ones faster than you can use Siphoning Strike on them. I hope after that you understand how power charge generation works on this build and on many other monk builds. Now, like I mentioned at the top of the video in what chapter this would be, pivot chapter, I think you can pivot into an ice build from this rather easily by swapping to Ice Strike and just moving around your passive tree a little bit to target ice nodes or cold nodes instead of lightning nodes and freeze nodes instead of shock nodes. And I have heard that freezing bosses in endgame and freezing enemies in endgame is an excellent form of defense. So far, I've felt pretty darn good on my Lightning Monk in endgame. I felt great throughout the early game. So I'm not swapping unless it's 100% necessary, and I'm going to blast my Lightning Monk all the way to whatever the pinnacle bosses are. And that's it. That is my beginner build guide for the Lightning Monk. It's not going super in depth. It's just trying to talk about what I'm doing, what I've done, and how it has worked out for me. If you have any questions, just leave a comment below. I will do my best to answer them. And if you like this type of video from me, and if you see ways I can easily improve, please also leave a comment. I really want to get into this style of content creation as well for Path of Exile 2. I could never do it for Path of Exile 1, and I think I can do it in a more succinct or clear manner than what I've seen before, especially for new players to Path of Exile 2 and beginners, just like we all really are in Path of Exile 2 right now. I think this game allows you to go in, look at the gems, look at the passive skill tree, and just create your own build and succeed. Like I said, I'm in T10 waystones right now. It's feeling good. Maybe I just chose a broken class. I have almost no exposure to other classes in the game right now, so I could be living in a complete bubble, but my bubble is working right now for me, and I hope it works well for you. So if you like the video, make sure to give it a like, and if you want more content like this about Path of Exile 2, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Both are completely free and the best ways to help the channel grow. That's all for this video. Thank you so much for watching, my fellow exile. I'll see you in the next one. Stay sane.